Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Shortly, we'll be joined by Dan Patlansky, who recently released his latest album, Moving On. But before then, the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And again, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, whatever you're watching or listening. So, welcome to Dan Patlansky to the Full Pelt Music Podcast. Absolutely delighted to have you on today. How are you doing this fine day?
Paul, I'm fantastic. Even better being with you this afternoon. And thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat to me, man.
No, absolutely. Obviously, really positive time for you at the moment. You've just put out your latest album, your 11th album. You're about to come and play some shows in the UK. So we've got some great stuff to talk about. And we will start off, obviously, with Moving On. It's the 11th album of yours. So obviously, you know what it's like to put out an album now. Obviously, reactions are instantaneous these days with social media and everything. It's not like the old days where you had to wait for the reviews to come in magazines or to meet people at shows. Obviously, you know what people think pretty much straight off the bat. So, I mean, first question just is sort of, what are we, a month after the release? How have you found the reaction?
Well, the word, the phrase that comes, or the word that comes into my mind first off is relief, right? Because it was an album I've been terrified to make for the last 10 years, but the album I wanted to make for the last 10 years. And you know, you know what it's like. You record an album, you write the songs, you record it, you wait all these months to get it released, and it's like this roller coaster, this emotional roller coaster that you go through with the album. So when you release it and you get very positive feedback from the album, it's somewhat of a relief, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. It really is, that people enjoy the album, love the album, or whatever the case is, and they don't think it's the worst album ever recorded type of thing. And you can understand that's, it's that emotional roller coaster that goes through your mind, you know, during that whole process, and you lose complete touch with the album, touch with reality on how the album's going to be received. So it's been received fantastically well, and relief is the is the biggest thing, because it's quite a different album to the last couple albums I've produced.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And obviously, part of that is the fact that you changed up the writing process this time around, and obviously,
Yeah.
included your bandmates more in that process. So, obviously, what was that experience like, to do so? And does that add even more sort of appreciation to the positive reaction that has come?
Yeah, I mean, it was very different for me. I mean, I've always been a guy that's, you know, been the sole writer on all the songs, right? And you feel, you know, I mean, there's a certain amount of pressure that comes with that, right? When it's just you that's writing and producing the album. And, on this album, I included my bandmates who just happen to be incredible songwriters in their own right. I mean, my bass player, Greg, that's what he does for a living. That's his day job, per se. He's a professional songwriter. And Andy, my drummer, who I've, been playing music with for the last 15 years, is just a fantastic songwriter and producer in his own sense. So the main thing for me was just getting everyone, all the songwriters on the album, on the same page, so we could head in that direction, and to kind of complete that vision that I had in mind, for the last 10 years. And I found that to be the biggest surprise, because, you know, both of them were directly and instantly on the same page as me, of where I wanted to go, how the songs I wanted to be, how they should be written, the direction they should be written in, to kind of reflect what I wanted to be, and kind of what's in my heart and all that kind of thing. So it was unbelievable, and it's I I can't imagine doing it any other way going forward. To be honest, just with this great team, it was brilliant, because often as a songwriter, you write something, and when you're writing with other people, they will bring in an idea or a concept that you would have never thought about it in your entire life. It's something that was very foreign to you, but it's brilliant. It's a brilliant concept that comes in and really adds so much value to a song, right? And that for me is the beauty and the benefit of this process I've just done and completed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really has paid off. It is a phenomenal album that obviously listeners really need to dive into and check out. And we're going to sort of delve into a couple of the songs off it now.
Sure.
Obviously, starting with the title track, because I've heard you mention that you chose Moving On as the title track because thematically it kind of set the tone for the whole record. So
Yeah.
what really are the themes behind Moving On? Both the album and obviously importantly the song.
Yeah, so I mean, it was the first song written like in complete, like a complete song that was written for the album. And the reason I say it inspired the rest of the album is because the song's really about being honest and kind of true to myself as a musician, as a person. The song Moving On is about something my father used to tell me as a kid all the time. As kids, we start things and then never want to kind of finish things, right? You would start, I mean, I'm talking from major things to the most in like the most silly little things in your life, right? Like starting karate lessons and thinking it's the greatest thing in your life, and 3 weeks later going, don't want to do this anymore, as kids do, right? To more major things in your life, and my father would always tell me, his thing was like, if you start something, you finish it, right? Like, you got to see it through. And it's something I'm trying to kind of distill in my own kids is that kind of willpower. And I think it really makes you a stronger person in this insane world we live in. It really does, and it's an important trait to have. And my father always used to say when I wanted to give up, just keep moving on, keep moving on. And it's a phrase that stuck with me. I'm 42 now, like for all these years since he was telling me that as before I was 10 years old. And it's something that's really kept me going in life when I feel overwhelmed or I want to kind of give up on something. It's, that phrase, my father's voice always comes into my mind saying, keep moving on. And, because that song was such an honest thing and it's such a rootsy, real kind of feel, that really gave me the courage to, firstly write the rest of the songs that I wanted to write, the themes, lyrically and musically. And then when we got into the album production and how we were going to go forward and the sounds and all that, to make it as raw and real and as close to a live performance as humanly possible in a studio type of thing, right? So that's why I say that song really kind of inspired the rest of the album. And you know as I said, it's an album I've wanted to make for 10 years. It's all I've wanted to do is make an album that if I wasn't the artist, I would buy and listen to and enjoy if I wasn't the artist. And you know that's why I mentioned earlier, relief was such a big part of it when the album was eventually released on March 1st. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a fantastic message. I mean, the world is insane, as you say, and it's a great sort of message from your dad there, and something that certainly, I think my kids, I'd hopefully be pushing that on them as well. So just keep on moving on, and another sort of key point you raise around the recording of the album, and it's something that I've there's a quote from. It was a member of the Who. It was either Roger Daltrey or Pete Townsend. There was a documentary I was watching years ago, and it just has always stuck with me that they were asked what set them apart from their contemporaries of the time, and they said that whilst other bands were trying to recreate what they did in the studio on stage, the Who were always trying to recreate what they did on stage in the studio. And that's
Right.
what set them apart. And obviously, that's a similar sort of attempt you've just made with the album. And a lot of people might think there's probably not a lot of difference, but actually, there is such a huge difference, isn't there? And obviously, you trying to do that this time round, how sort of did that change your methodology?
It's such a great question, and it's such a great observation. You know, I think with modern technology, I think it was a very different world, when the Who were recording albums, right? Because in the 70s when you recorded, technology wasn't quite at the point where it is at now, where you could have 7 million takes at a solo or a vocal performance or this, and you could layer as many kind of parts on top of each other, and you kind of create this almost larger than life image of your music, really, for the world to see. And it's a very, very tempting thing to do in a studio, because you can, and you create this colossal album that sounds, as I say, larger than life. But the problem is, and I've done albums in the past with other producers with that kind of mindset going kind of into it. And yeah, the album sounds absolutely fantastic and larger than life when it's released. But then you have this moment when you get into rehearsals after you've recorded the album of like, how the hell do we make, how the hell do we perform these songs and make them sound anywhere near as close to what was recorded? Because we'll need a 30-piece band to kind of, with all the little parts and samples that kind of grow and make that part sound bigger, and all the vocal layers and the guitar layers and whatever it is, right? And for me, that's great. I mean, you get a really great album, but my kind of issue at the end of the day is every time you hit the road, you almost feel inferior to the album, because it doesn't matter how much you've rehearsed and how well your rendition of that song is. It's never going to have the size and the production quality of what you put on the album, unless you have a 30-piece band on the stage, right? And that's just not a viable thing. And my heart has always been the blues thing, the real thing, the live thing, and in a sense, I find I kind of lost my way with that a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I've got no problems with the albums I've produced in the or been part of and produced or had produced in the past. They're great, but that was the thing that used to kind of really eat me up inside when doing it. I'd listen to it and say, that's not me, actually. That's not actually me, because when I do it live, that's me.
Yeah.
That's the most honest form for any musician, is like being on stage in front of an audience playing live. That's who you are, really. And for me, I almost kind of felt like I was a bit of a phony, because I felt like I was disappointing an audience, because yeah, it's nowhere near the size and the production quality of what it was. But I mean, that's how the song was written and intended, at the beginning. So for me, it was about recording something that is as close to identical as live. And I really feel we've achieved that. I mean, we've just finished a tour here in South Africa of launching this album, obviously heading to the UK. But the difference is between this album and any other album. Other albums we could maybe do 4, maximum 5 tracks off the album live, and this we can do all 10 with with ease, right? Because it comes so naturally, gets a fantastic audience reaction. So then I know, yes, I've achieved what I set out to kind of achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it must be a real sense of vindication there. And obviously, I love a segue. And you mentioned obviously that you didn't feel like it was you, what you were putting out before. Obviously, the next song I want to ask you about is "Who I Am." So it is a nice little segue there. So
Yes.
yeah, that was obviously the first single that you plucked from the album to put out there and share with the world. And it's always a bit of a statement single. I feel the first song from any album
Yeah.
sort of to see the light.
Sure.
So what stood out about that song that made you pick it to be that statement?
Well, that song was after we wrote "Moving On" as that first tune that inspired the album. That was the second tune that we wrote for the album, and that was at almost the point already where I kind of realized where I wanted to go for this album, but far beyond the album, where I wanted to go in my life musically, right? Just to be honest and just go back to what I love doing the most, right? And it's a bunch of things what I love doing the most, but it's they're particular things, and that's that song is really about, a car trip. I took a very long through the night car trip, being on your own type of thing. And there's something very special about being on your own in a car for that long, where your brain kind of, after a long time in the car, kind of quiets down and starts making sense of the world, right? It really does, and starts figuring things out because you're giving yourself this time to kind of think. And that's what that is. It's about a realization of it's not regrets where I've been, but how I've kind of, in a way, lost my way of what I really am and what I really want to be. And that's really solely what that song it was all about. And I was pretty chuffed about the way it came out on the album, and it just seemed to be an appropriate, I wouldn't say the best single to release first, but the most appropriate single to release first, because this whole album's concept was about not trying to write a single for radio,
Yeah.
not trying to write songs for a purpose. Because I always find those are always the worst songs on the album, with the ones that you go, oh, we must write a song where the chorus comes in the first 15 seconds, or something to the cookie cutter that
Yeah.
that radio, commercial radio, or whatever wants, right? I was like, let's try and forget about that. Just write songs that we love and that we're passionate about. And so for me, I was like, bugger it. Going to be this. That's going to be the first single, because it really sets the tone for me for what this album's about.
Absolutely, and there's such a freedom to that, not being sort of held by the expectations of what a song has to be in 2024. And
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, it's a fantastic single and a great lead single to the album, and it's also got a fantastic lyric video that listeners should go and check out. There'll be a link in the bio for that. It really sort of fits the aesthetic of the song, I felt, and there's some stunning visuals in there. So, how did you obviously come up with the concept for that lyric video and put it into practice?
Paul, I cannot claim not even one bit on the video. I had a keyboard player playing for me for years, a guy called Dean Barrett, who played on the last couple of albums, and he toured with us live for many, many years, and until I decided, that my true passion was the trio thing again, right? Like that power trio thing. But what he does equally as well as playing keyboards and the music thing is he's an incredible kind of, I don't know what the word is, if it's a videographer, or
Hmm.
you kind of get
Yeah.
my just like a video guy that understands visuals and videos. And I approached him and said, listen, man, we don't have necessarily the time to shoot like an actual classic music video where we're miming to the song and all that. But the lyrics are very, very important to me on this video, because it kind of explains the album in a sense, and the concept. Can you do a lyric video for me? And this is kind of the premise of the song, and what the song's about. And he, I think he did a fantastic job, because he really took what the song was about, that whole driving thing, and being out and kind of letting your brain wonder and figure out your problems and where you need to be in your life. And I think I was chuffed with the end result, because it really spoke to the message of the song.
Yeah, absolutely. He did do a fantastic job. And having heard you explain, the sort of themes behind the song, it actually brings it even more to life for me, having just watched it a little while ago. So yeah, listeners, definitely, worth checking the video out. And all leads up to, you're on your way over to the UK within the next few days. You've got a tour kicking off, 8-day tour, I believe, hitting up obviously all the main sort of cities. Again, there'll be a link in the bio that will take listeners away. Hopefully, you can find a show to come along to and come and check out these songs live, because they deserve to be heard live, as we've discussed. That's what they were built for. So,
Yeah.
for you coming across the UK, and obviously you got this tour lined up, what would you say that fans should expect from the shows?
Well, it's for me, it's we pre-toured these songs before we recorded them, just to test them out, kind of like the old school way of doing
Yeah.
things. So we toured the UK. I don't know when it was. It was April, May last year, and we played some of these songs, right? And we played them for the whole of 2023. So we really understood the songs, what needed to be changed, you know, everything about the song. And we eventually went to record them. So I feel the show is a very, very established show, right? Even though they're brand new songs, they're established. I feel for me, it's the most true reflection of me in a live set. It really is. It's how I want to be remembered, kind of these songs. So I think it is a fantastically powerful show. It's a in-your-face show, a lot of raw emotion, a lot of soul, and obviously I'm taking this from the last couple of South African dates that I've done. It's really gone down well, and I feel it's the most natural show I've kind of played. It doesn't, I don't have these moments where you kind of look down on the floor at the set list and go, oh, not that song. Like let's just play it and get through it to get to the next one. Like everyone is a joy to play. I mean, obviously we're doing some back catalog stuff too from previous albums, but obviously the focus is on the new album. So I just think it's a full kind of energy show. We leave nothing behind when we get on stage, and I'd love some of your followers and listeners to come down to the show and kind of experience it.
Yeah, absolutely. They must. And obviously, I say there'll be a link in the bio. You can find the tour date. Come and see Dan over the next sort of week or so while he's in the UK. And obviously, you've kind of been adopted by the UK as kind of a second son over here, obviously. And the British blues scene is just thriving at the moment. There's so many great artists out there. And yeah, it's such a great time to be a sort of blues musician in the UK. Obviously, for yourself over in South Africa, how much of an influence has the scene here, and obviously your experience of touring over here over the last sort of few years sort of influenced you?
It's influenced me a lot, man. Obviously, I've got a fantastic following here in South Africa, don't get me wrong, and there's other fantastic blues acts in South Africa. There's no doubt about that, but it's a very, very small micro industry compared to the UK, the States, mainland Europe. You kind of get my drift. It's a niche anywhere in the world, so it is like a micro niche in South Africa. But so what I really have taken from touring over the last 10, 15 years in the UK is really the level of musicianship and level of blues musician in the UK. I mean, it's so high, and it's often you'll get a support act, that you've never heard of in your life before, coming on tour with you in the UK, and they are just burning and ridiculously good. And it's such an honor to have that before you go on stage, because it just elevates you to another level. Because the people playing before you are just so incredibly good and on it and on the money, that you get on stage and you're like, well, I've got two choices here. I can either just not play, or just kind of elevate myself beyond who I am, just to kind of make some sort of an impression, right? So that's the big thing for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and so you have been adopted over here, and it is great. The blues, was sort of maligned for a fair while, since the boom, back in like sort of 70s, 80s, whatnot. But yeah, it's really, really thriving over here now. So obviously, listeners, there's a lot of great artists to check out, and if you're sort of diving into blues for the first time, Dan's a great sort of step in there, and obviously, come along to one of the shows and see what the scene's all about, because it is really, really on the up. And my next question for you is around sort of technology, really, because we've touched on it slightly in this podcast and how it's changed the music industry, either in some ways for the better, in other ways maybe not for the better. But researching for this interview, I noticed that you have sort of set up your own Patreon, which a number of bands that have come on the podcast have done, and we've always like asked what your experience around that is. You particularly, Dan, obviously there's Learn Guitar with Dan, so an opportunity for budding guitarists to come and hone the craft and learn some lessons from yourself, which again 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that didn't exist. So it's a great opportunity and a great platform. What is your experience of Patreon, and obviously that connection it gives you with your fans?
Well, Patreon was a lifesaver for me because of COVID, right? It
Yes.
really was. And Patreon wouldn't have been something I even would have perceived before COVID. So, I'm kind of thankful for COVID in a sense, right? Because, as I taught, bits and bobs growing up, taught guys how to play, taught more in certain areas of my life and all that. And obviously, all live shows stopped in lockdown and COVID, and it became a necessity to kind of live and earn a living. So for me, it's just been an incredible experience, and it's something that I've kept going as strong as I possibly can because I love doing it so much. And I mean, I've been, I think the Patreon page has been around for almost 3 years now. There's probably close to 300 lessons available right now on that Patreon page. And it's been awesome. And, it's still to this day, even though live playing and touring is back, it's something I look forward to doing every single week. I post 2 videos a week, every single week without fail. If I'm on tour, I pre-record them just to make sure that they get out. It is an incredible, incredible experience. And it seems to be, for me, a little community within a community that's kind of grown on my Patreon page of fans that are learning things and suggesting things that they want to learn, which I love. It's been a fantastic, fantastic experience, and certainly won't kind of stop at any time soon. It's something that really brightens my day. Kind of parting knowledge onto other guys.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear. And I say something that wasn't around even 5 years ago. COVID, as you say, really sort of kickstarted it, and it's just a new avenue for musicians, obviously, to be able to support themselves in a tough climate, but also to build that connection and that community. A great word that you use, and build that around yourself. So, again, there'll be a link to your website down in the bio, listeners. Click through and you'll find all the details on there. Definitely recommend you go and check it out. And it brings us to our last sort of main segment for the podcast, something we've had in for maybe about a year or so now, because we keep talking about different aspects of the music industry, and it is quite a tough industry to be in, particularly at the moment. So we've started having a feature called Magic Wand, and I'm going to take you to Fantasyland for a moment, Dan, and I'm going to give you a magic wand. And with that magic wand, you can change one thing about the music industry, but one thing only. So it's quite a pressure question, So what, with your magic wand, would you like to change about the music industry?
For me, it's very simple for me. It's a simple thing that streaming is a great thing. It is. It makes your music available to the entire world instantly. It's a brilliant, brilliant concept, streaming, and I get why it's there. But if I had to wave a magic wand, I would wave it and change the way musicians get paid on streaming, because it's only the streaming platforms and record labels that seem to be making the money on streaming. That's the thing for me. I think it's, as I say, it's brilliant. In the old days, you needed a big fat record deal to kind of get your name out to the world, right? Out of the country you lived in to the world and start selling product. And obviously now you don't need a label. You can be on every single streaming platform, with a blink of an eye instantly, and be available to the world, which is brilliant. But the way musicians are being destroyed financially on that, right? I mean, because it's not just the streaming that it destroys. It destroys your physical record sales. If you're selling vinyl or CD or whatever you might be at a show, if you're selling music at a live show, which we all do, I've noticed in the last 5 to 6 years that is literally halved, if not like three-thirds down. It's really hurt it, and I get it, because people have your new album on a streaming platform. But unfortunately, the money that we as musicians earn from it is laughable, so that would be my magic one thing. It really would.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree any more with it, because I always go on a bit of a rant on this podcast sometimes. And obviously, first things first, encourage listeners there, if you can afford it, buy a physical album, because, it supports the artist, but also it's just great to have a physical album, to open it up, to look at the booklet, to feel it, to smell it, to touch it while you listen to it. Completely different experience. But Yeah, streaming is fantastic. If I go to one of your shows on this tour, Dan, and obviously catch your support band, as you say, and they're absolutely fantastic. They blow me away. The fact I can go home that evening and press, come on Spotify or whatever streaming platform I use and listen to them is fantastic. However, fair distribution of the wealth that comes from streaming is so important. It's such a subtle change that would instantly make things better. If I subscribe to Spotify and I listen only to Dan Patlansky, sorry, get you on it.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's the first day with a new tongue, you see. So but yeah, if I listen to you exclusively on Spotify, Dan, then surely my money should go exclusively to you. But at the moment, it's not. It's going to Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, etc., all the record labels, and you're not really seeing that. So just fair distribution of that wealth would be such a subtle change. And I will always support artists. When they come on in that segment and raise streaming fees, it's such an important and theoretically quick change that could be made to make things better. So no, you've certainly given a great answer there. Thank you so much for that, Dan. And it's been really great talking with you. Obviously. I always give out the social handles. So you've got a tour coming up, new album out. Listeners, best way to stay up to date, as we say, is social media. So yours is really easy because it's literally your name on Instagram and Twitter. And then it is Dan Patlansky Music on Facebook. So
That's it.
Just got to remember the music bit there. But the links will be in the bio. Listeners, go give Dan a follow. Come along to a show if you can. Check out the album, buy a physical copy if you can. They're my messages. But I always give the final message of the podcast back to the guest. So Dan, what would be your final message for the listeners today?
Well, I mean, it'll be very similar to yours. I mean, I appreciate your time, Paul. I really, really do. I feel privileged to do this for a living. I really do. And, love when people come and support. It really means the world to me. Obviously, buying physical product is great. And if you can't afford physical product, stream it, no problems. just enjoy the album. Spread the word about the shows. We want to kind of get as many people into these shows as I possibly can, and I just hope you love the show as much as we love playing the show.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Definitely, listeners, come and check it out. And Dan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Dan. Do make sure you check out his latest album, Moving On, and of course follow him across social media to stay up to date with everything coming from him. You can also stay up to date with Full Pelt. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And finally, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Full Pelt Music Podcast.